Welcome to the Remember When podcast, a podcast where we take a step back and reminisce on the old times, the good times, the future, the past, everything. I am your host, J.U. Kalkrick. I'm excited to have you guys join us on this adventure. It's going to be a great show. We have a great guest in line today. Our guest is Dr. Jen Welters. She was the first female to be a coach in the NFL. We're going to get into the weeds. We're going to get into how I first met her and all her endeavors and everything from her love of the game of football, playing the game of football, to her doctorate, to being a author for children's books and everything in that. And you caught us at a really good time because Bruce Arians just announced his retirement. She actually Bruce Arians hired her as the first female coach in the NFL. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about Coach Bruce Arians and everything like that. I'm super excited that you guys are able to join us today. Everything is handled on the back end by producer Ray. Producer Ray, say hi.
Hello.
Ray, do you like coffee? Are you a coffee drinker?
I love coffee.
You love
it's a
coffee.
staple in my life.
That's great. The Remember When podcast is we're proud to have a partnership with Guava Coffee. This is a great coffee brand. And the really good thing about it is it's directly from farm to the cup. I know the owners of Guava Coffee, one of them especially well, Ed. They're going to be on the show in a couple weeks to tell us more about their coffee brand. But this is like really cool. It's a coffee company that, the coffee beans are directly from Guatemala. It's everything. It's put in there. From the farmers, and everything goes back to the community and the villages in Guatemala that the coffee is farmed at. So this is not like your typical coffee company that, the middleman gets all the money and everything like that. This is a coffee company that really cares about where the coffee comes from. They care about their clients, their customers, and everything like that. And the really cool thing about it as well is a percentage of every bag that you buy of this Guava coffee goes to water filters that goes back to villages in Guatemala to help these communities. That is really cool. So Guava Coffee, go to www.guavacoffees.com to order your bag. And at checkout, make sure you put in Remember When at checkout. Right down below, and the link is below. Put in Remember When, and you'll get 10% off each order that you put in. Also, the really good thing about Guava Coffee, there is no shipping fee. That is huge right there. So you get your coffee, you're getting 10% off, as well as free shipping. This is really good coffee. You can get it in.
Hey, where's mine?
Yours is coming. Yours is coming in the mail. And our guest, Jen, hers is coming in the mail as well. Everyone wants it. This is a hot commodity right now. I have so many friends that have been reaching out to me to get their hands on some of these. So Guava Coffee actually gave me, a big box of them that, to give out to the guests, obviously give out to my producer, Ray. And it's a great coffee company for a great cause. And these guys really, really care about their customers. So I'm really excited to announce the fact that we have partnered with them, and the Remember One podcast is partnered by to Guava Coffee, and they're going to be on in a couple weeks to tell us more about their coffee company, their coffee brand, what they stand for, what they represent, and everything like that. So, with that, without further ado, we're going to jump into the show. So, I just want to sit back and tell you guys a little bit about the Remember One podcast. The Remember One podcast is a podcast that we just sit back, we reminisce, we have guests on the show, and we just reminisce about how they formed their success. Because everybody, every walks of life, we always just see the finished product of where they are. We see the success. We don't understand the story that got them to where they are. So we want to sit back, we want to take a deep dive, peel the layers, and find out why they got into what they got into, how they got into what they got into, and what ups and downs, what trials and tribulations they overcame to get into what they got into. So we're going to sit back, we're going to reminisce, we're going to talk about great stories. We're just going to enjoy it. We're going to laugh. We're going to cry. We're going to be excited. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. And I'm excited for you guys to be a part of this ride with me. I appreciate all the support that we've been getting so far with the show. There's a lot of really cool things that's happening, a lot of great success stories that we're going to talk about, a lot of great tragic stories that we're going to talk about as well, and how we can learn from that. And it's a lot of life lessons that we can learn. The Remember One podcast, powered by Guava Coffee. At checkout, put hashtag Remember When to get 10% off. So producer Ray, I know you're going to be bouncing in and out and everything like that. I love it because you guys have to realize producer Ray does everything that you see, the motor behind the show, it's all him. I just get to show up every Thursday and sit in my chair and put this together.
I do the heavy lifting.
He does do the heavy lifting, but he's done the heavy lifting for a long time. He works with a bunch of great talents throughout the country, great radio stations throughout the country. He's been doing this for a long time, so a guy that I totally trust. And he's a respectable guy in the media community, so we're excited to have him aboard with us. Right, like what are some when we talk about Remember When, what can you reminisce about your time?
What, as a kid or as an adult or in my career? It's as a kid, I was always a creative kid. I wasn't your normal kid. I always I was the kid that used to get in trouble in class, drawing on his notepad, not paying attention. But as one of the things, I always want to be a cartoonist. So looking back at the cartoons back in my day, I was born in the 60s, and the biggest thing was the Peanuts, Charlie Brown and all that. The cartoons on TV were Kim of the White Line and Speed Racer. Actually, since I'm from Michigan, the Lions weren't not my favorite team. It was the Steelers. Always wore a Steeler varsity jacket as a little kid. Watching them win all four of their Super Bowls back in the 70s. I remember sitting in the front room watching that with my dad. That was my first experience watching football, and then I got to start playing football. And then, the first time I played football, and it was 1979, the first time I ever had a helmet on my head. And I didn't take that helmet off until the age of 50, almost. And it's back when I was in college, and where were you at when the space shuttle blew up? I was sitting in my dorm room, and my roommate and I are going, "Did that just happen?" this show is kind of like remember when and also remember where you were at certain parts of history in the world. You
Right.
know,
And the crazy thing, you bring up football, because football is a big part of my life, from the fact of playing high school football, college football, and playing in the NFL. Sit back and remember when my first ever like football experience or watching the game of football was actually when I was back in Africa. Because for the viewers that don't know, I was born in Liberia, West Africa, moved to America when I was 10 years old. The first football game that I ever saw in my life was a Pittsburgh Steelers, Oakland Raiders football game. And I watched the game. I was like, wow, what is this? Because I grew up playing soccer. I didn't like football. I didn't know anything about football. I grew up playing soccer, and I watched this game, and I remember I was so attracted to the Steelers black and gold. And when I finally, moved to America, we had family that lived in Pittsburgh and everything like that. So I just gravitated to being a Steeler fan. So that's how I started to form my love for football. And it was back in the 90s. So, it was the Neil O'Donnell, Barry Foster, Bam
you're
Moore,
a
Greg
kid.
Lloyd. Those days, and formed the love of football. I grew up a huge Steeler fan. And the really crazy thing about that is, so I started playing football when I was in ninth grade because I went to such a small school, and my school did not have a soccer team. I played summer soccer growing up the whole time, and all my friends in the summertime, they went to football practice. So one day I got up, I went to football practice. I told my coach, hey, coach, I want to be, because the only person I knew in football, it was back when the Broncos were really good. Then Terrell Davis they were in the Super Bowl and everything. I said, I want to be Terrell Davis. I want to be number 30. I want to be a running back. And he goes, well, I can't make you Terrell Davis. You can be number 30 and you can be a running back. I was like, hell, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So I will take it. And I became a running back. I remember the first carry I had in a game where we played a school outside of Western New York, in Western New York, outside of Buffalo, called Panama. And the first carry was a 58-yard touchdown run. I was like, I can get used to this game. So, for my love of it. And then when I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to play at Michigan State. And when I went to
And I
college,
work for that network too.
I know you do.
And well, also back in 1988, remember when is when what is when they that was our friend Deb who was texting me during our live show. And but when we had the strike year in 1988, and I'm like, I just got home from college. I'm on the practice squad for the first arena team here in Detroit, and I tried out for the Lions. Funny story, and it's like when I was trying out to be a long snapper, and then when I was trying out, I did everything great. Come up to my 40-yard dash time. Mouse Davis, everybody knows who he is. He was one of the engineers of the run and shoot. He was a special teams coach at that time. He times me, and then he goes, son, I can time you with a sundial. And then 20 years later, when I was playing semi-pro, when the Palace had their indoor team, all of us in semi-pro paid our $50, got our T-shirt, and went out and tried out. He was head coach for that arena team. And then he goes, Templin, I can still time you with a sundial. What are you doing?
You were memorable. You were memorable. That's
Yeah.
funny. That's great.
So also, we have a guest backstage that she's waiting very patiently, and because you and I can go back and forth on this all night.
Yeah. So let me jump into that. Let me introduce our guest.
I'll go backstage.
Our guest today, we're super excited for. Like I said, she broke barriers, broke ceilings, literally kicked glass and broke it. I'm super excited to actually not just call her a guest, but call her a friend. And when we bring her in, we'll talk about the first time that her and I met and everything like that. But she was the first female that was hired to be a coach in the National Football League. And our guest this time is Dr. Jen Walters. Let's bring her in. What's
Hello.
up?
Good to join you. Good to see you. At least virtually. Again, it's been too many years.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the crazy thing is, we talked about I said I was going to bring up the fact, the first time we met, and it really goes back. I think it was like 2010, I believe. Yeah, 2010. I just left San Francisco. I signed a new contract with the Bills. I was back home in Buffalo, and my buddies were like, hey, it was right around my birthday. We were like, hey, let's just take a trip to Pittsburgh and have a weekend in Pittsburgh, celebrate your birthday. So we pull up to the Sheridan Hotel in Pittsburgh, and while we're pulling up, there's a bunch of charter buses, a bunch of coach buses, and all these women are getting off the bus. We're like, oh shit, the girls are in Taylor, We're excited about it. But the thing is, so with that it was the actual WFA Women's Super Bowl that was going on that weekend. And that actually was the first time a women's tackle football league was playing in an NFL stadium at that time. And Jen, it was the San Diego Rebellion against, I forgot who they were playing at that time.
The
Do you
Rebellion.
remember? Was it Chicago?
It was Chicago, I think.
Yeah. Because I was in the hotel with San Diego. So we had, but at that time you were on Team USA.
Yes.
Yeah. So
and we had come and we were there because we had all won gold medals. So we were there to support and, see all our teammates play. And I think we had lost in the round before that. So we were probably still a little bitter. Dallas was not used to not being in the Super Bowl,
But you didn't show it at all. You didn't show any bitterness.
Sure. No, I'm sure. I like almost being in the Super Bowl. This is not anything about me, but had great friends on both teams, right? Obviously, this, like playing in an all-star game, playing on a national team, you get to actually, like, instead of knowing of people and being used to just hitting them, you get to know them beyond the pads and helmet, and that's when the friendships were made. So yeah, we were there, and yeah, it was crazy. What a good time at Heinz Field.
Yeah, but the thing is too, though, I'm not gonna let you get away with this. You were stunting with some rings. That time.
Yes, I actually have 6 rings. So 4 Super Bowl rings and 2 gold medal rings on the first and second U.S. national team. So I have, and I see some of the girls' camp pictures here, and I tell all the girls I have 6 rings and I earned them all. They were earned, not given. So I tell them to be ring chasers like that.
Exactly. Because a lot of other girls be ring chasers other ways.
That's right. We want championship rings, ladies.
That's true. That's really cool because I had the opportunity, to meet you, sit there, talk to you about it. I remember it was a scorching hot day in Pittsburgh on game day, and you guys played before that. They played another the championship game that you guys weren't invited to. But I just got to go back and say, like, where did you get like the love for football?
I grew up in Vero Beach, Florida, and football's a way of life there. It's like, the stadium there. is the biggest thing. It's the town shuts down and everybody goes and watches football. The whole community is there. And I remember looking down on the field and thinking the guys looked like real life superheroes. And I wanted to be a superhero. Like, who doesn't want to be a superhero?
Right.
And it's funny because that was also one of the first places in the world that somebody told me there are certain things that girls can't do. And that was football. And so it was interesting to me because I hadn't really thought of that. Like, we weren't like that in my house. So it was kind of like, I say football was a crush from afar, and always wanted to be able to play, but never had the opportunity until I was 22.
So yeah, so that's the crazy thing is because like now you're like this mogul for female in football, and you didn't get started till you're 22. I look back at me, and I think it's like a anomaly when I didn't get started till I was in 9th grade, but it's a
Right.
little different. So like, was it just not a thing for girls who play football, or is that like a taboo thing or something like that?
Yeah, it really wasn't an opportunity. And even in flag football, the closest you could really get back then was powder puff. And I mean, some people did. There were some girls who, have said they played at different times. That wasn't really a thing in my high school. And so, when I went to college, I actually played rugby because that was the closest that I could get to football. I had never even seen rugby before I got to college. And I was like, wait, what is this game? It's like soccer meets football and I get to tackle. Like, I was in. I just was 100% in, played all 4 years for Boston College, got recruited to the under 23 national team. Then they figured out I was 5'2" and, not exactly the size they were looking for. And so didn't make it there. And, finally had an opportunity to try out for my first women's tackle team, which was the Mass Mutiny. It's now the Boston Renegades, and made that team. And so that was it, right? Like, I was like, I'm in for this.
So yeah, I get your little stunt there. You threw out a little Boston College, a little what's that, Chestnut Hill,
A little Chestnut Hill, yep.
yeah,
Little
and
Chestnut Hill.
I'm a little bitter about that because my senior year we lost our bowl game to Matt Ryan and the Champ Sports Bowl at Boston College. So I get a little hurt about Boston College when I see them, and we lost a really good coach to Boston College. My running backs coach Ben Sermons. He went to Boston College. Now he's with the Packers. But yeah, so you came about and you started playing the rugby and
There's
everything.
a little rugby right there. Yeah.
So what made it click? Like what was it like? Okay, I want to play football. Was it when you went to Texas?
I was already playing by the time I went to Texas. I started in Massachusetts. So I was playing in a flag football league on weekends, and the team in Massachusetts called and asked if they had any girls that were playing, flag that they thought could play tackle. Now, full disclosure, coming from rugby, I always kind of tackled. So I was probably a bad flag player. They were probably like, get her out of here. And I went for an open tryout. And so I played my first 2 years with Boston, and then moved to Texas from there, basically 15 years.
Wow. And did I just see a video that your first check was like $12?
It was. Football wasn't really, most of us were paying to play the entire time. And that $12 check was from my first, Super Bowl year. It was literally $1 a game. And the check that you saw, actually, it was funny because I talked about it when I got hired by the Cardinals, because, that was before photo deposit, and it was a choice, right? Either you cash it or you keep it. And I kept that as a reminder of what I was playing for.
See, that's very interesting because I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you if you ever cashed your first check, because the fact is, when I played for the Jets and the Cowboys were the only two teams in the NFL that did not use direct deposit. They used paper checks. And my first check for the Jets, I never cashed. I have a frame in my house.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Well, hopefully you'll never need to break glass to activate it.
Well, I think it might be like expired or something. I might have to reach out to them and say, hey,
You still owe me some money.
Right, exactly.
Now with photo deposit, you can still keep the check.
Yeah, exactly. That's the big thing. It's technology these days. Technology is taking over the game of football itself. So, okay, so then you play that, and then I'm really curious as to this, because when you see women playing sports and you see women playing impact sports, let's say that, playing football, playing everything, you usually see them as a kicker, maybe a punter, sometimes in the rarest cases, a long snapper. But you were another, like I talked about kicking glass, you were another rare form. You were the first female to play on an all men's team in an impact position as a running back in Atlanta, correct?
No, that was in Texas.
Oh,
Texas
yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, Texas,
Yeah.
The Texas Revolution. Yes. Yeah. So, like, how did that come about? How did that transpire?
It was actually after I'd won my second gold medal. And we came back, and I'll never forget it. We were playing in a championship game against Chicago, and our owner comes into the locker room, and she tells us all, like, this better be your best game because this is your last game as Diamonds. This iconic women's franchise, right? 4 Super Bowls, always, contenders, was folding, could no longer afford to stay on the field. And I don't know if she thought that was going to like pump us up, but I can tell you, I've never gotten whooped in a game like we got whooped that day. I mean, we got smashed on. And
was it whooped? Were you embarrassed, or is it just a total ass whooping?
Oh, I mean, it was embarrassing. Like they
because there's the two. When you get whooped, or when you get embarrassed.
I mean, it was kind of both, but full disclosure, we did not have a quarterback. Our quarterback had sprained her ACL. And so we had our running back had to get thrust in. And it was bad. It was just bad on all cylinders. And we got demolished, and we were all like, I mean, we were like orphans, basically, right? Like none of us knew what we were going to do. None of us knew what was, what we were going to do next. And I remember Odessa Jenkins, Alberta Fisher-Bryson, like me and a few others decided we were going to go play for Houston, right? Like we would just make the journey each week. We were going to go play for Brian Wiggins in the Energy because we'd known him forever.
Right. And the Energy is still around.
The Energy's still around, owned by former NFL player Brian Wiggins, good friend. He came into Houston the first day I came into Dallas, and he definitely used to hate me. Because he's an offensive guy, and I used to offend him quite a bit by messing up his offense. But we all had this plan, and then I get a call from a team called the Texas Revolution, which was a men's indoor team. I had no idea why they wanted to meet with me, but I was like, all right, went in, and it was so funny, right? Like having a PhD in psychology, sometimes you wish you didn't, because you're like, oh, reading the room, right?
You're overthinking things.
Yeah, right. I walk in, and the coach, just wait. He is like drawing in his non-existent playbook, right? It's like, if he doesn't make eye contact, somehow I will not exist, right? Like he was not here for this meeting. meanwhile, the owner was like very excited. He just was so excited to meet with me. And I was like, really? Right. And so, the owner goes like, Jen Welter, we think it would be amazing if you would come in and go through a day of training camp with our guys. And I was like, oh, you mean you want me to like come in and like run some ladder drills and like maybe catch some passes, smile for the cameras, like that kind of thing? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, absolutely not.
You didn't want to be a show horse.
No, I was like, as somebody who just won my second gold medal, that's an insult.
Right.
And if I was any one of the guys on your team, I would absolutely hate it. So if you want to do anything with me and your football team, either I do everything they do, step for step, hit for hit, or I do nothing at all.
Mm-hmm.
The second the words came out of my mouth, I was like, dear God, I just got myself killed. Like what, what was I thinking?
Right.
And yet the coach, I'll never forget, Coach Dove, he was like this, he went that, and he just kind of smiled and he nodded his head. He was like, okay. And he looked at me and he was like, every hit. Yes. Step for step. Yeah. One guy cuts you, I swear I'm gonna cut him. Okay. Or one guy, sidesteps you, I swear I'm gonna cut him. You sidestep one drill, I'm gonna cut you. I don't think you're gonna make it. And I was like, I don't know either. And then he's like, and one more thing. I watched the game tape. Yep, you can tackle, you tough. You can't do that here. You'll get run straight over. Only way I can take you is you're gonna have to play running back. And I was like, whoa, hey, hold up. That's exactly opposite what I'm good at, right?
Yeah, you're more physical. You're more giving the hits as opposed to receiving it. Yeah,
right. And reading it the other way. I'm like, Coach, I'm a little bit more scared of playing running back than I am about playing with dudes. And he goes, it's the only way I can take you. And I was like, well, okay. And that was literally how it came about. And, from there, not only did I make it through training camp, which most people thought I would not, how this is.
Right.
And of course, everybody's going to test you. Take the hits, just get back up. It's like, all right, I'm going to do it again.
So my question to you is this.
Mm-hmm.
All right, now, so you're a female.
I am.
Go through. You go through.
I got that memo.
You go through all this. And then you walk into the locker room filled with testosterone, filled with all this. And they're like, hey, meet your new running back. How was that received in the locker room?
Well, thankfully, we'd already gone through training camp, right? Like, so they already knew that I was, as I said, they wanted to know, I think the guys needed to know two things, right? One, that I was there for the football, right? I wasn't just going to be like, oh, you can't hit me, I'm a girl. No, that's the job description, right? Mm-hmm. And two, that, we could all get along in the process, right? That it wasn't going to be weird. It wasn't going to be this, like I could crack jokes with the best of them. And that's really what it was. So by the time like I made that team, the guys were actually already all for it, right? Like they were like, she's about it. And they really, it was something that they kind of rallied around. And they were like, yeah, that's our girl. Like, you should have seen it. Like, there was one game when the guy was like, oh yeah, like, I'm going to hit that. You better protect her. And I swear those guys were about to jump over and kill this dude. And I was like, don't you dare let him use me to get to you. Like, this is so obvious what he's doing, right? Like, I will kill you myself. We're fine, right? But they really did kind of rally around it, and it was something that they were very proud of. And those guys to this day, like Clinton Solomon, who used to play in the NFL, was on that team. And Solo and I are great friends. We stay in touch all the time. And he said, I still have people ask me, wasn't that the team with a girl? And he says, no, it wasn't that. Like a girl, it's the girl. He was like, I am still blown away by the fact that you did that and you handled it. And he's like, you made us all better because I never thought a woman could do that. And the fact that you hung in there with us and, you know, every day, never quit, always like getting back up, working hard. And he was like, and everybody knew how well you knew the game, right? He was like, man, it was special. And it was that really opened the door to me coaching. It was the relationships with those guys that caught the attention of former Dallas Cowboy Wendell Davis when he took over as the head coach the next year. He saw how the guys responded to me, and then he grilled me on football, right? Sits me down, and, you know, Wendell's a close talker. He's real intense. You know that guy, right? Back, right? Like, because that's all I have to say, right? So it's like, and, you know, the next day he called me and said, all my defensive coordinator and I could talk about after we left was how you have to coach this football team. And I was like, oh.
So
I did. I said no to him because I've never seen a woman in that way.
That's true. I'm going to bring in one more person in on this conversation. It's her name is Deb Schneider. She's actually a sports law professor at Michigan State, and great friend of mine. She's going to be joining us a lot of the time on the Remember When podcast. And Deb and I, we go back and forth. We have battles with everything. Hey, Deb, how are you? I can't hear you. Still.
Well, she's stuck at an airport right now. Yeah, her mic's down.
She was supposed to be on the broadcast with us, but she's
going on
for the sunshine. So, and she's stuck on it. Deb, can you hear us?
Her mic's not working. Oh, that's because turn up your little earpod thing. Welcome to live podcast.
Deb, can you hear us?
I can't hear you.
No,
all right.
Can't hear.
I'll stick her backstage. All she needs to do is unmute her mic. I'll fix it.
Yeah, sort that out back. So Jen, so my big thing is this: like you talked about the fact of, you know, cracking jokes, you know, with the boys and everything, like, because that's different. You know, what like, did you grow up in the family, you know, just cracking jokes, or like what, like how did you become like one of the boys? You know, like where did?
Oh my gosh! So there's the first time I remember, right? That was just like when they were like, oh, we're good, right? We are in training camp and we're going from one drill to the next, right? And you know, the running backs coach is like, hey, running backs, do you have your balls? So of course, one of the linebackers says, yeah, coach, all but Jen. I just looked at him and I smiled and I walked up to him and I patted him on the chest and I said, that's okay, baby. When I need some balls, I'll just take yours out of your wife's purse.
Oh.
And at that moment, everybody was like, yeah.
Oh, she's in. She's in.
Oh, yeah, she's good. And even, oh my gosh, one of the funny ones too, right? I told you about the guy in the game.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you got to protect her. I'm going to hit that. Like, blah, blah, blah. And the guys are getting all mad. Well, later in the game, we're both on the field. He wasn't the one who tackled me, but it was in between plays. And he just happened to like walk by me. And I was like, did you just grab my ass? And he was like, what? Because that's not something you're used to hearing on the football field.
Right.
What? No. And then he was like, that was awesome. And he literally starts laughing. And he was like, yo, the doc is cool. He's like, that was amazing. He's like, and then after that, this guy who was like trying to torture me or whatever, right? He goes from that to like, so is everything good on this team? Anybody I need to handle for you? Like, come on, like, you know, you can talk to me, like, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and it really just to me is like, that's a football team, right?
Right.
That's what we do. We're family. We laugh, we joke, and can't take things too seriously. And, that was the same with the guys.
Exactly.
And I think the guys really appreciated that because they didn't know, right? Like
Right.
they didn't know what it was going to be like. It's going to be weird. Is she going to flip out? Like, no, I'm not going to flip out, right? Like I'm not. I'm going to laugh. And, if there's any time when something that you say isn't quite in line, probably what I'm going to say is, you do realize you said that out loud, right? And they'd be like, "Oh my God." I mean, I didn't. I'm like, I know. I mean, I'm just letting you know that maybe that collection of words should never come out of your mouth ever again. That's maybe what I'm going to do.
You were an enforcer physically and mentally on the field. So that's what lead me to. So I know you studied psychology at BC, and then you got your doctorate. Like,
well, I studied business at BC and then got my doctorate after my time at BC.
Okay. And so what made you, say like, hey, like I want to get in psychologically with this? Because
this is the funny part right here. You see me running off. Hold on. You see me running off the field? And then she turns me back around because I had to go block. I had to go play offense. I was like, yeah, interception, we're done. And she was like, nope, come back. You're blocking. And you'll appreciate this, Jay. You know why I started blocking on that team?
Yeah.
Because we had a running back. Oh my goodness. Freaking Jessica Springer, number 46. She was just out on the field. She was the best I've ever seen do it. She was 5'10", 220 and ran a 4.8 40. Like she just destroyed people. And when I first got there, which was my 4th season, I was like, she's one block away from like to the house every time. But she was so big and strong that it was hard getting someone who was strong enough and fast enough to block for her, right? Like it was like either they were fast and they weren't blocking, or they were great blockers, but they weren't fast enough to get in front of Springer. And I just went to my coach. I was like, Coach, I want to play offense. And he was like, Welter, you don't even like offense. I was like, true. Let me correct that. I want to play defense for her. Like one block. Let me block. And he was like, I don't know. Right? Literally, I don't know about this. And I was like, come on, coach. So he had given me plays, right? And I learned them. But I'd never gotten to line up. Never got to line up in, actual practice, right? So that game that was just showed the Houston energy. That was the energy that we're playing. I line up. They call it for the first time, right? I've never even gotten to line up in practice from bunch formation. We're going to run toss crack. I'm coming from the inside. I'm going to take that corner home. And I realized I'm lined up in the wrong spot first time. So what do? I move. Ball start, of course, because we can move on defense, right? Like we can move. They can't move. And I was like, oh, and of course everybody's like, oh, Welter. And I'm like, you never actually let me line up in practice, right? Like it sucks. And so then I line up the right way. We got a penalty, walk it back, line up. We do it again. And I'm telling you, when I tell you, I took that corner back to her mama and drove her like into the next planet, and Springer scored. I was like, so are we good now? Right? Like, so we're doing
You made up for it. You made up for it.
And it was so funny because that was the game when she turned me around. I'm like, I'm off now. And they're like, oh no, you're not. You're coming back and blocking. And Springer she was like a gentle giant, right? She's such a G. She'd literally go up to the coach and be like, Coach, can I have Welter? I'd like to score now. And I'm like, meanwhile, I'm a rookie on this team. So, you're like,
right.
Hi. And that was the year that we won our first championship. But I was technically Springer's backup on some things, which meant I was never getting in the game. But I was there very often as a blocker for her. And I just used to love blocking people to get them out of her way, because when I watched it before that, it was like, she is magic. Like she had one person to block for her.
Right.
It's going to be done. So yeah. So I had to tell you that because I was like, I was just laughing as you see me like leaving the field, like, oh, I'm done. I played defense. And she's like, nope, you're going back in on offense.
Exactly.
That day after,
So,
after a literal false start.
So we're going to transition into now going to the NFL. And before we do that, let's see if Deb is good again, because I think she'll be great on this conversation.
For sure.
Deb, are you there? Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we're
Yes.
good.
Yes,
Are you in
I'm
some
sorry.
airport hangar somewhere, Deb?
I am stuck in an airport.
See, it was great. We tried. So just for clarity, we wanted to get Deb on the show, and she was like, I can't. I'm flying to Florida. But hey, we made it work. So
Yeah, my flight was canceled, so I'm sitting in an airport.
Oh no.
So Jen, this is Deb.
It
Deb
happens.
is she's a professor at Michigan State. She's a sports law professor, and
Right.
Deb and I have had numerous conversations
Numerous.
on a bunch of different topics, from women's equality in sports and everything. And we
Right.
see eye to eye on majority of things. Some things we butt heads on, but it's great. That's conversation.
That's what sports is, isn't it?
Exactly.
You butt heads. Literally, Jen, you know that. You butt heads on things.
All the time. All the time.
Yeah. But it's, I mean, I think we've had some great conversations. A lot of, Jen, I look at you and I am so impressed. I mean, you've been able to navigate basically a man's world in a lot of ways, and that's phenomenal. I just had a whole lecture on Title IX and how that, and I guess, and I don't want to get too much, into it, but Title IX is something you were born with, you grew up with. How do you feel that helped you? Is that okay if I ask a question here?
Sure. I think it's interesting because the time that I've come up in sports, we're starting to see the evolution of equality, where it's no longer enough or to just be allowed to play, right? Or to think that, we should not be just settling for scraps anymore, right? And I think that that's where the real evolution is, because at one point we didn't even have the opportunity. And now we're starting to talk about how we can, start to achieve parity and equity. And yet at the same time, I've been in the sport that hasn't had parity at any level, right? It's only now at the point where you can get a college scholarship to play flag football as a girl. Like last year was the first year, right? So we're living in a time where this America's game is starting to try and catch up, right? To where other sports have set the tone. And so, for me, the ability to compete has been a part of my whole life. And, for so many women, sports have that impact. I don't know what person I would be if I hadn't had the opportunity to play sports throughout my life, because it's been so foundational in who I am and how I see the world and how I compete in so many different things, right? So to me, Title IX has been the catalyst for a lot of the things that we're trying to see ourselves work towards when we talk about equity and inclusion.
So, Jen, so I want to jump further ahead here with this equity and inclusion. I know in the NFL, and the league just had their league meetings. They had the coaches meeting, the owners meeting, and one of the biggest things, one of the big takeouts of those meetings, is the fact that every team must have an offensive assistant that is either minority or a female. And talk about, like, I'm going to say this a lot, talk about kicking glass. You were the first female assistant in the NFL, not assistant, the first female coach overall in the NFL. How did that come about?
Well, first, I have to say, I'm glad that they're making conscious steps towards equity and inclusion in terms of minority coaches. It's been an ongoing conversation on the need, right? Women are just now really coming into the conversation with that. But there's not anybody who can look at the percentage of men who are African American, Black, minority in the NFL as players, and then to see the trajectory to a head coach and wonder where the disconnect is, right? Like it's not hard to see that we need better representation through all levels, including ownership, right? And so it's good to see that there's progress in terms of literally taking action item steps where teams are going to open up those opportunities some, and in ways where coaches have direct relationships with the head coaches, right? For me, how it came about, I was actually coaching in men's pro football for the Texas Revolution when Sarah Thomas was hired as the first full-time referee in NFL history. And a reporter asked Bruce Arians if he could ever see a woman coaching in the NFL. And his answer was, the second a woman proves that she can make these guys better, she'll be hired. And so I talked to my head coach about it, and he's like, well, we should call Bruce. And I was like, why am I calling him? Don't you guys have like an NFL black book or something? Like, but I ended up calling the Cardinals on behalf of myself, as if I wasn't myself. I simply said I was calling behalf of the head coach, and my head coach wanted to talk to their head coach because although it was not the NFL, there was already a woman coaching in men's pro football, and he thought Coach Arians would like to have that conversation. And so I literally left a message for Bruce Arians on behalf of my head coach, never really thinking that it would get through. I thought I got blown off, but I was really proud of myself for calling the Cardinals. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I called that, and about 2 weeks later, Bruce called my head coach and said, tell me about this girl. And, he eventually invited me to OTAs, and, and he really made that happen. I remember in our conversation just how important it was to him. And, he had known a great coach in college, at Hines Junior College, and the fact that it was no better for women in all that time, somebody had to change it. And he said, I don't know yet if I can make this happen. I have to get a lot of yeses, but I want you to know it's in my heart to try. So there was never, some people think I must have banged down every door and, this, and it wasn't. It was really Bruce and I, and, and he made that happen. And he's been a champion for equity and inclusion throughout his career. And really, he always said, like, when I get a head job, I'm going to do it my way. And that's his way. And I think he's a hero for all women in football, to be honest.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, Bruce, and it's really, crazy that we're talking to you today, just a day prior to him announcing his retirement. And I saw on your social media the posts that you made about him, how thankful you were to him and everything like that. And I think that's really cool. But, so when you came in, did you feel like, okay, so the first day, because I know, and I think it was totally different from you. I played high school. I've been in the locker room with dudes in college. and then been in the NFL, and walking into an NFL locker room must have been intimidating. Walking to an NFL meeting room must have been intimidating. Now you're the one that's going in there and you're like, holy hell, I'm the first. Like, what is that? Is it intimidating? Is it like what are you thinking? Like, what's the thought process in that? Like, do you feel like I got to prove myself? What is
Oh boy, I want to hear the answer to this one, because this is
Well, it's interesting because, like, this as well as I do. The first thing that happens isn't you walk into a meeting room with the guys or this, that, and the other. Like, I remember the first player I met was Calais Campbell, and
you couldn't have met a better first person.
That's right. And what happened is literally, like, I'm going, there's like a corner, and I'm going, and he's going, and he almost like steps on me, right? And Calais is 6'7", so it's like, please don't step on the children, like Shaq from Blue Chips. Like, it was literally that moment, and we turned the corner, and it was kind of like, and I was like, "You're Calais, aren't you?" And he was like, "Yes, I am."
Coach, in that deep voice.
And and we immediately, like, we're talking. I was like, "Calais, you're 6'7", and he was like, "Yep." And I said, "I played against a girl your size once," and he was like, "No, you didn't, Coach." And I showed him a picture of, they called her the Giant from Germany, and I was this speed rush end against her, and I was like, it was literally, they said it was like Kid versus the Giant, and he was like, "Coach, she's giant." I was like, "I know." And he was like, "I can't believe." He's like, "That's dope," right? Like, and we just talked football, and he was like, "Man, I'm so glad you're here." And I was like, "Okay." Right. Like, and little did I know that he is just like as wonderful and a friend to this day. But like, that was like, all right, we're going to be okay. Right. It's football. And then, we met all the coaches who were coming in, and we're meeting everybody. And I will never forget Daryl Drake, who was a receivers coach in the NFL for a long time. He didn't have to talk to me. I'm a freaking linebacker. What does this have to do with him? But we're introducing ourselves, and he's like, "Coach, come in here." It's okay. And he said, "Coach, I'm old." Okay. And he says, "I have forgotten more about football than you've even had a chance to learn in your young life." And I was like, "True." And he said, "But you know what? Not a guy in this building has that PhD that you do. And we all need it. It's not talked about nearly enough how important the mental side of this game is." And he said, "But I need you to bring your whole self to every meeting. Linebacker stuff, that's cool." He was like, "But you are the only one here that has that. And I know I'm going to tap into it." And let me tell you why I learned that was so important. He said, when I was at Chicago, I had Brandon Marshall, and it was when he was first talking about mental health. And he made me so much better as a coach, because I realized just how important it was to be more than the X's and O's. And he said, "You already have that." And he said, "So we need that from you. Yes, you have to do this, but that is some place where none of us old dudes have the answers, and you do." And I don't know that I wouldn't have done that, because it's not really like me to not offer information, but to have him make it a point to tell me that, yes, I was different, and yes, my perspective was different, but that it was a good thing, not a bad thing. And why, and that, because I didn't know that no one else had that. I didn't know that they didn't have someone in that capacity. And, it was a way that there was always a way to add value. And, a lot of credit to Bruce Arians. He used to ask me about things like that all the time. He'd be like, "Coach, I need to talk to you about this, Bob, so-and-so with this." Or we were sitting in a meeting one time, and a guy had struggled with something, and nobody, like, the coaches were like, I don't know. And one of them looked at me, and they were like, "Doc, can you," that guy? And I was like, "Do you mean talk to him?" "Yeah, I got you. No problem." And so there's obviously, I think the intimidating part was less internal. Like internally, we were good. The guys were thrilled to be a part of history. There's very, very few times when you get to be a part of shifting culture. And I think they were even more conscious of that than I was because they'd been in the system, right? They'd be like, Coach, I never thought we would have a woman. And like, I'm so proud of you for being here. Like, I thought it was hard for me to get here, but for you, like, this is history. Like, and, you know, and I'd kind of be like, I just got to not mess up, right? Like, you know, but they really understood because they knew what it was like before that, right? And so we internally were really good. The hardest part, I think, is realizing that the world is watching and the weight of that first narrative rests squarely on your shoulders because there's not anyone else to be in the conversation at that point, right? It's like the entire conversation of whether or not a woman could coach in the NFL at that time lived solely, you know, with us in Arizona. And people say it a lot. They say, you know, first and not last, but I don't think they actually know what that means because you have to do a good job as the first, or there can't be a second, because otherwise the flip side is that you're the reason why the door is closed tighter than it was before, right? I never wanted to be, we had a girl once, ... and you were the reason why it couldn't work. Or, you know, now we look at Bruce Arians and we're like, of course he, you know, so many people have said, well, of course he should do that. Of course he should. Well, it was like 100 years before it happened. So where does the of course fit in? It's not obvious. It's not easy, because had something gone wrong with his great legacy and the guy that he's been, you know, coach of the year, Super Bowl winner, all of those things, it would have been like, yeah, but do you remember the time he lost his mind and hired that girl? Right? Like there's risk in being the first. There's risk, there's upside, sure, but like it's not easy. And to have been that conversation is really tough. And, you know, to hear people talk about you as if you're not a person, right? There are people who, you know, when you're doing something different or you're leading, you know, or first, like first one means only, right? So it's very lonely. There's not somebody you can compare notes to. Like, there's not like, oh, hey, like, let me talk to you about that time you coached that team. Like you're by yourself. So you really have to be authentic in yourself and trust that, right? And first also means you are the disruptor. I literally had someone tell me that I was the face that gave them nightmares because I was the face of change. And that's a really tough thing to know, that there are people who will not like you simply because you exist, right? Simply coaching while female, right? Like that's it. I didn't, you know, it just means that very few people are neutral about you. And that is the hard part. Like, I don't think we had the players, never the problem. Players have been my greatest allies, always have been, which is not what most people expected. I don't think they give the guys enough credit. I don't think players get enough credit. Players see all of it, right? Like they see all of it and they will call BS in a heartbeat, right? If you're there for the right reasons and helping them out, they'll love you, right? And it was the other conversations, I think, that are really hard. I never had a problem with the room with the guys. It was just like when I played with them, I'm gonna cut jokes, right?
Right.
And made them
I think a lot of it is the outside. I agree with you 100%, Jen. It's the outside when you're working within the organization. And I think that's a really, really good point, is you're the first, you're the only. And if you do a good job, there will be the second. If you don't do a good job, there will not be the second. And we won't.
Or it'll take them many years. Right. Many years before they get over it.
Until they forget all about it.
So, speaking of that, jump into that, if you do a good job, you'll be the first or the second and everything like that. And Jen, I'm going to tell you this. I've told you this, in a private conversation, and if you don't want to respond, don't respond. If you don't, I'm going to throw you on the spot here, but I honestly do not feel that you get the credit you deserve for like breaking down those barriers, for breaking the glass ceiling. I don't feel you get the credit you deserve for that, because from from where the WFA was at the time in 2010 to where it is now, that they're playing their championship games and the Super Bowls at the Hall of Fame Stadium in Canton, that from women being coaches in the NFL to, from where you started and now, I don't think you get the credit that you deserve for that. And like I said, you don't have to, respond. I don't want to put you on the spot on that, but I just want to get this out there and let you know that, because there's a lot of nuances and everything like that. And I think you are, like we talked about, the fact of the Rooney Rule being adjusted and
Yep.
changed. I think that's because of you. You came in and just like you said, that you had to be a great first. You had to be a terrific first. And I think that's why now with the Rooney Rule, that it's a minority or a female. And I think that's opening the door for a lot more females to get into coaching. And how do you feel about that? With the Rooney Rule changes and everything like that.
And that's a brand new change too. So that
Like 3 days ago.
3 days ago, right? That's a big
Yeah.
deal. Congratulations, Jen.
It is a big deal. Well, I know that, the Bill Walsh Minority Coaching Fellowship was changed to the Bill Walsh Diversity Coaching Fellowship as a direct result of what we did in Arizona. I do know that, and that was huge that they made that move at that time for women. You mentioned the Hall of Fame. I was, I worked with them extensively for probably about 5 years, advocating for women and girls to be included in programming and conversations, and even in the hall, right? Like, I was on advisory boards for them for 5 years, constantly in the conversation of where women fit, right? And it's great to see now women getting more opportunities there at the Hall of Fame. I think what's hard is, the loud voice, which, is kind of what I've been put in the position to do. And I think it's necessary, right? Like, I challenge myself to, like, okay, somebody has to say this, somebody has to do this. And it's not always popular. Like, that's the thing, right? Like, it's not, and I think that's where, where you feel like it might not be, the credit is, not everybody wants that, right? Not everybody wants that person in the conversations, and that could be part of it, right? And I challenge myself to do the right thing, not the popular thing. And that's different. It is. I have people all the time asking, why I fight or why I do this. Well, I literally say to myself, well, if you don't do this, or if you don't say this, or if you don't stand up here, or if you don't advocate for these people, or if you don't build this program, then the wrong woman was the first female to coach in the NFL. And I don't always feel brave, but like, I'm also, a person who's done more in my life than was possible for girls at that time. And so if I'm not leading and advocating for change in one way, then does it change, or does it change as fast, right? The women who are in there now, they are doing a great job. They got in there their way. That's their credit. It's not mine, right? But it did take a first to get a second, right? And every time I see it, it's like, right, that's amazing. It's hard to not be there also. it's hard to see a door that you opened and not be in the building. But I often think of it as being like a really good lead blocker, right? Like I said, I fought to block for Springer. I still do it. And that means that you'll take on those things. You'll take the hits, you'll get bloody, and someone else will score the touchdown. Someone else may go further than you ever did. And that's, it's hard, but it's also, I don't really know how to do it any other way. And maybe I could have finessed it more at times. I'm sure I could have. But if there's no one speaking about it and advocating and continuing the conversations, and whether it was making girls camps, right, or working with Madden to change that element where we could have representation even in that game, and girls could see themselves there and boys could see that.
And you are in Madden.
Yeah. But those changes aren't easy to come by, and you ruffle feathers every time you do something that pushes the limits. I'm sure there's somebody groaning somewhere of like, oh God, not her again. Right? Like,
so my question to you, Jen, is what do you see first? Do you see, I guess it's not what do you see first, but do you see a female head coach in the NFL?
I think you'll see it in the NBA first, to be honest, because of the basketball.
Seabird.
Right? Becky Hammond was close, right?
Yeah.
I think that just because of the nature of basketball, right, and the numbers, and also the trajectory and the parallel paths of the WNBA, right? We've seen Nancy Lieberman, Lisa Leslie both be head coaches of Big Three teams. Nancy obviously was the head coach of D-League team. So I think there's just been more of a parallel pathway, right? We haven't even gotten there yet in basketball. So knowing that the trajectory for head coaches in football tends to be a longer path, and we're just at the beginning, I think it's going to be a while, but we will see it. I mean, Kevin Stefanski has openly said he wanted to groom Callie Brunson to be a head coach, right? He said that was his goal. And you can see that positioning taking place when Callie was named the head coach of the U.S. national team. I know I had to go to Australia to be able to be the head coach of a national team, but I also knew, and I told friends of mine, that was one of the hardest decisions of my life, was taking a head coaching opportunity in Australia, because I had my teammates from Team USA who were very upset with me because they wanted me to play. And what I knew is someone, again, had to be first. Someone had to set the precedent that a woman could be a head coach of the national team, because we'd never seen it before in football. And I said, mark my words, the next time there's a Team USA, there will be a female head coach if I make this decision. And so I took a job where I knew we probably wouldn't win a game. These ladies had only been playing for 3 or 4 years, knowing that it would create a conversation and movement towards having a female head coach for the U.S. national team. And now we have one, right? So is the pathway being laid for her? I would say yes. Do I think it'll take a while? Yes, it takes a while for men to be head coaches in the NFL, right? It's just the experience, all elements of the game, and getting exposed to all of those things to be able to do a really good job, right?
Right.
I think it's really, really interesting. We're talking about women being the first. And, I was one of the first in the back office. Basically, I was legal officer for auto racing. And I was, the only woman walking in
right
into the board meeting. So you see that over and over. But a lot of it, I keep going back to the fact that Title IX passed in 1972. And how long did it take us to get to the point that you became a coach? And, and you're talking about that pipeline, as we say. I think the pipeline is so important. You're talking about the pipeline in basketball. Is football ever going to really get there? Because we don't have women's football.
We do.
We do, but it's not on the level of WNBA or any of that.
It's not, but it's
How long is it going to take?
It's made huge strides.
It has.
In my career, for example, again, flag football is now a varsity collegiate sport. Girls can change the trajectory of their lives through education, through playing football. We've never seen that before, which means these girls can start at a young age and can play that sport to go to college, right? That's a huge shift with generational implications.
That is a game changer.
It is a game changer. And you're seeing, women's football being streamed. I think alternative broadcasts are huge, right? And they have been in all of women's sports, right? There's great research on it. We've had to find alternative ways to showcase women, and the adoption is so much higher, and the fans are very loyal. They'll go and do it. And you see the WFA, the WNFC now with streaming deals, and that allows fans to get engaged. And streaming means eyeballs, which means dollars, which means then yes, you should be able to see women, instead of them paying to play, like we've all done, you can see them starting to actually be paid to play. And I think it's going to come a lot through the media angle and a lot through the education. And as these girls are coming up and their fans and their heroes don't have to be guys in the NFL, they can be women, right? They can be women who coached, who played, who this. Then you've got a whole generation of girls who have new role models and they want to do what they did. And so whether it's, in the flag space or in the tackle space, like these girls will see and can see these women as they evolve. And that's when you'll start to see more dollars go there. Right. But it's been so underground for so long that, that was a challenge.
Yeah. And, you talk about the W, shout out to the St. Louis Slam. I'm a fan of them. So Jen, Deb, you got any more hard-hitting questions? I got some questions.
I've got so many questions.
I know. I'm already locking Jen in for a couple more feature episodes.
Good. Yeah. Jen, I just want to continue the conversation on in sports and the first, and the importance of getting out there. The broadcast aspect is such a huge piece because we really haven't had broadcast. For instance, this is the first year that women can actually use the March Madness trademark for
right.
That's huge. I mean, when you start thinking about it, it's been since 1981 that NCAA has been holding these championships, including women. Right. So I know I'm hitting the women angle very, very big, but that to me is such a big piece of, Jen, who you are and what you've done, and you've done so much for football. So I'm basically in awe. So thanks for chatting with me.
Oh, look, it's my pleasure. I think, it takes everybody, and it takes consistent voices and consistent advocates to really work to, move the needle, right? That's not easy. And it's not one person. It's, it's consistent advocating and working to, bring awareness, to bring conversation, and to consistently look at where we can advocate. And I think, for me, I challenge myself again, like I said, all the time to see where I can add value or lend voice or, shine a spotlight on all of the women who are who are doing great things. It's not just me. Like I tell people, I was the one who was in the position, right? And said yes. Doesn't mean that I was, the only or the best. It means I was in the right position and I had done a lot of the work to be able to say yes. But now having gotten that position, right? And then it's a platform, and I take it very seriously. Like Olivia Griswold, OG, who I played with for years. I remember when I was playing on the Texas Revolution, and there were a lot of people at that time who were like, why is it her? She's not even a running back. Like, I'm like, true. Right. I'm playing on the run. And she just looked at me and she's like, you know what? Well, I'm so glad it's you, because you represent all of us so well. And she's like, I see you. And she goes, I hear the other stuff. I don't care. Like, I'm proud of you. And it's OG, right? Like that's what matters. There are always going to be people who you can't be enough for, or you didn't do the right thing. You didn't say the right thing. I don't always do the right thing. I certainly don't always say the right thing. But I try to lead with good intention and to consistently advocate when I can. I think sometimes people think I can do more than I can. But I certainly, I certainly try to go down swinging at all times, right?
Yeah, you're being pulled in different directions.
Yeah.
So, Jen, there's a couple. Deb's got to go. She's going to take off. Couple stupid questions for you. All right, one's got to go. Pizza, wings, tacos, or pasta?
Oh, you can get rid of pizza and pasta for me, but you can't take for the tacos. I'm allergic to gluten. That's easy.
Okay. So for the wings, drums or the flats?
I like the drums.
Oh, you and I could be wing eating partners. I like
we
the
could.
flats. Yeah,
we could. There's just I don't like all the bone breaking in the flats. I mean, I'll do it, but like if they're both sitting next to each other, I'm probably gonna go for the drums.
Okay, and then a lot of people in Buffalo will judge you on this now. You know, Buffalo's my hometown.
I know.
Ranch or blue cheese?
Ooh. God, what are you? You're gonna say ranch, aren't you?
No, Buffalo.
I always grew up with blue cheese. I don't.
Yes.
The ranch thing was that's why I was like, am I going to be wrong on this? Because like, I get confused when people advocate for ranch. I'm like, is that?
Yeah. You never go wrong. You never go wrong with blue cheese. If you go to Buffalo, they don't even offer you ranch. It's blue cheese and blue cheese.
I'm not used to being offered ranch. That's why I was like, is this almost a trick?
Is this a trick question?
Yeah. I was like, is he going to say?
Yeah.
Weird.
Before we give you take off, let's let producer Ray get in here. What do you have for Jen, Ray?
Hold on. Paper or plastic?
You live in California, so you got to be all hippie and hoity-toity now.
I know. I think the question now is like, did you bring your own bag? Isn't it?
That
there
is
you
true.
go.
Sustainable bags. So I'm going to take.
Actually, I do have a serious one. If you didn't play football, what other sport would you have played?
Other than rugby.
Other than rugby.
Oh, other than rugby?
Yeah.
I played soccer all through high school. I was a 2-year captain. I was the sweeper. That was passion for me. And I actually had a choice going to college either to play D3 soccer or to go to Boston College in their business school. And I chose business school. So, but I was a soccer lover and I was the sweeper. And nobody was getting to my keeper. Like I wore number 13 because I was bad luck for them.
Oh, also, it's like, this is a podcast. Remember when, who was your hero back as a kid? It can be anything other than sports or
Yeah, I mean, my dad is a legit hero. Like he is, he has a silver star and 2 bronze stars from service.
Wow.
So I have a deep love and respect for the military because of, you know, because of his service. That's why a lot of the events that I do and causes I support are military. So he's definitely one of my heroes, right? He taught me about like battle and his army boys and a lot of the ways in which like I kind of viewed football and how you take care of your teammates and your players came from, you know, stories he told me from Vietnam. And I literally have a very distinct code of, you know, how life should be from some of that. And so he was one of them. And on the sports side, it was the women who played tennis on TV. It was Zina Garrison, it was Gabriella Sabatini, it was Martina Navratilova. I looked at those women and I thought that's everything a woman should be, right? They were powerful and out there and crushing it. And I think it taught me just how important the representation is and to be able to see yourself in sports because it motivated me and I wanted to be like those women. So, you know, all of them. And I, you know, tennis was my first sport. So
Okay, Ju.
Yeah,
Who's your hero?
you know, so Jen, we're gonna get you out of here. We really appreciate you. I know you've done a lot. You have kids books, everything
Yep.
out there. Can you how did you get into that? Just tell us a little bit about that
there's one. The
and
Resilient.
how can our listeners and viewers get those books?
Yes, they are all available on Amazon. You can cool thing about Amazon is you can literally just have it sent directly to you. There's 4 books out now. I started that series during COVID because you know my world stopped like so many people's, right? I was used to being out speaking or you know on the football field, and all of a sudden we all got shut in, and I heard from so many of my friends how much their kids were struggling. And, you know, I put my PhD hat to use and I was like, I can help with this. And I started writing. And I have a great illustrator named Manda. And I think we had 3 books out within maybe 4 months of the pandemic starting, just speaking on different elements about how kids could deal with it, right? That's Busy. Busy does exercise books. So in Busy's book, you get a dynamic warm up. You have animal based exercises, right? Like the feathers there. And then a cool down. So each book has about a 20-minute workout in those. And we have a bunch more of those, but that was the first one that came out because the first thing that people were struggling with is being stuck inside and, you know, not being able to move. When a ladybug can't hug was all about social distancing and how you could connect through the heart while staying 6 feet apart. And they are all rhyme books because that helps with tracking. For kids that struggle with reading, there's kind of a reward at the end. This one was Wearing a Mask Says I Love You, because wearing a mask is weird, right? Up until this point, it would have been a villain or Halloween to wear a mask. And so kids needed to see that it was bigger than just them. They weren't being punished and it wasn't about them. So the ant army became our frontline workers, and all of the bugs wanted to help. Especially little ladybug there, who's very sad that she is stuck inside, as you can tell. And those are the COVIDs. I think they're pretty awesome, actually.
That's great. Jen, you know, we really appreciate you jumping on. My last question to you is you've done a lot. You've accomplished a lot. You've, you know, overcome a lot. And that's one of the biggest things, you know, with this podcast. It's a reminiscent podcast. But we're gonna jump to the future for a second now. And like I gotta ask, what's next for you? You've accomplished so much. What's next for you?
It's that's a great question. I think for me, I'm always trying to progress forward. I have a team in Simwin, which is pretty cool. Guys will see that coming out, and it was really, really amazing to be asked to be an owner of a franchise with guys like Marshall Falk and Jerry Rice and a bunch of those, and to be able to make sure that the women were the heroes. So we are the Valkyries. And it was so funny because I looked at all the mascots that they had at first, and I told my friend David, I was like, I can't. He's like, pick one, and I was like, I can't pick one. I was like, what do you mean you can't pick one? I was like, it's all like dudes and dogs. Like, where's the female hero? And he, and that's a hard thing to say, right? Like here's the franchise, and we want you to do all this, and it's kind of like, I guess I'm really good at opening my mouth in these situations now, but it was still, I didn't know what he was going to say, and thankfully he looked at it and he was like, you're so right. And we literally brainstormed and came up with the Valkyries because those are heroes from mythology, right? And they are women who have been strong, and why not have that representation? So that's part of it. But for me, I mean, I have Gridiron Girls. We've done about 50 camps across the country. We'll continue to do that. A day in the life, we teach women football. And you could see me on a staff at some time that I've never not wanted to coach. It's just this as well as anyone. Staffs are mini families, and there's not. I don't have the same level of connectivity into that football community that you do, right? The natural one of like, you played for all these coaches, or
Right.
you had all of these guys on each team that you were on. So there's not that depth of relationship. So I think it's challenging because a lot of people, like I say, there's a big difference between people who know of you and know you. Right.
Correct.
Like there are a lot of people who know of me, but
Right.
they don't know whether I'm, they want to spend those long days with me. Right. Like, and I tell people, I'm like, it's that, right. It's, how is this person going to fit into our culture? We can teach scheme. We can teach, playbook. You can learn our lingo, but you have to be like, I want that person around, and I'm going to invest time in teaching those. Wendell taught me that. I remember when he, when I was hesitant, and I was like, I've never coached before. And he's like, I can teach you how to coach football. I can't teach that. He's like, I can teach how those guys listened to you and how they respected you. I was like, I can teach that part. He's like, but most people miss this part. And so I think that's the big thing. But for me, again, I'm always going to look for where the opportunities are and who are those opportunities with, and where can we make a big impact? Because, I know at this point, I think, and you'll get this and you'll know exactly what I mean. I know that not everybody wants someone like me who isn't just going to be there, but is going to be there.
Exactly.
Right? Going to bring opinions, right, wrong, or indifferent, is going to be vocal, is going to be active. And so what I hope is that any opportunity now is someone who knows exactly what they're getting, and that's exactly what they want, right? They want someone who's going to be present, who's going to be vocal, who's going to bring it. And
exactly.
And if they don't want that, I'm probably not the person for them.
Right. That's perfect. Yes, Jen, I really appreciate you taking the time. And like I said, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm gonna reach out to you again. I'm sure I want to have you on again. You're super interesting. You're a pioneer. You're, like you said, you're a glass kicker, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us. And to our listeners, our viewers, thank you so much. This episode of the Remember When podcast is brought to you by and powered by Guava Coffee. Make sure you go to www.taguava.com to get your coffee and use the promo code Remember When to get 10% off every order that you place with taguava.com. And also remember, shipping is free. Jen, really appreciate you. And the listeners and viewers, be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, SoundCloud, everywhere that you listen to your podcast. Take a look at us. Next week, we have a sweet guest lined up for you guys that will be announced in the next couple of days. But, you can go back to this and listen to this interview on YouTube tomorrow. You can listen to it on SoundCloud, like I said, and also on Facebook. Really appreciate you guys. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you, and like, you're true inspiration, and you're taking the game in the right direction that it needs to be on. For all of us and for producer Ray from the Remember When podcast, we appreciate you, and peace out.